Olivia was most like her father. Virginia couldn't help but smile and shake her head at Olivia, who stood with a rag doll dragging from one pudgy hand, a curl of brown hair hanging over one eye, the permanent mischievous grin on her round baby face. She studied her mother with direct, candid eyes, ready to back her big sister Martha in any argument that might get them both out of the house. "No," said Virginia, her voice softening as she knelt to hug them both. "Neither of you is going off to school." Olivia swung her attention back to Martha. Were they to throw a tantrum, cajole further, or let things pass and go back to playing? But Martha was not ready to give up. "I bet Murphy has been lonesome." "Murphy is doing just fine." Virginia rose to her feet and tasted the stew for seasoning. It was fine, she decided, as she pushed the pot to the back of the stove. It would be ready for supper when the men came in from a long day of working with the horses. But she had to make the biscuits and the pudding for dessert. The clock on the wall alerted her that the baby would soon be waking from his nap, and Mindy would be home from school. "Why don't you play with the blocks Papa made you?" she encouraged her two daughters. "We already did," muttered Martha. "Then play with the dolly house from Grandma and Grandpa." "We did that, too." "Would you like—" "I want to go outside. That's what I'd like." Olivia nodded in vigorous agreement. "I understand," said Virginia, as she moved to get out a bowl and ingredients for making the pudding. "But we don't always get what we want." "I know that," replied Martha, with an impatient swing of her arm. "But why can't we get what we want sometimes?" "You do, sometimes." "Why can't we this time?" Virginia looked at the clock. It was wrong to give in to Martha's badgering, yet it was so difficult to be harassed when precious time was slipping away. She had enough on her mind. Supper preparations were pressing on her immediately. She was tired from a long day spent doing family washing, had been up for much of the night with a teething infant, and she sure didn't feel like waging war with a persistent youngster. Yet if she gave in, Martha would think that she could always have her way. Virginia turned. "Listen to me carefully," she said firmly. "Mama will be as happy as you are when you are able to go out to play again, but it is still too wet and too cold to go out today. Mindy will be home from school, and she can read to you. But for now, I want you to find something to do together, and I do not want you to ask about going out again. Do you understand?" Virginia's eyes moved from the pouting face of Martha to the younger Olivia, who was looking to her older sibling for signals of how she should respond. Olivia's lip came out as she mimicked the face before her. "I want you to be cheerful about it," Virginia added, looking from one small girl to the other. "And, Martha, I want you to be a good example to Olivia." Martha glanced at her chubby little sister, and her countenance changed. She had obviously lost this round. There was no use wasting further energy and time fussing about it. "Can we have a cookie?" she said, choosing another approach. "You may have your milk and cookies when Mindy gets home." Martha lifted her shoulders and let them fall with an exaggerated shrug. "Then what can we do?" she asked, her voice and expression plaintive. Virginia mentally scrambled for another suggestion, knowing they were as plagued by the weather as she herself. She could not blame them for feeling restless. How about, she struggled to come up with something. "Drawing some pictures for Papa and Slate." "Yeah," enthused Martha, clapping her hands with a smile replacing the frown. "Yeah," echoed Olivia, smacking tiny hands together, her face mirroring the happy grin of her older sister. Virginia provided the two with paper and crayons and set them up at the kitchen table. "Now, don't write on the table, and don't just scribble," she instructed Martha. "Draw a picture on the whole page before you go to another one. Try to color inside the lines." The girls settled in happily, eager to fill the empty sheets with wonderful crayon scrawls. Virginia turned back to her mixing bowl. The sun was now streaming in the kitchen window. Hopefully tomorrow would be a better day. Mindy would soon be home to entertain her 2 younger sisters. Perhaps the supper preparations could be completed on time. She had just placed the pudding in the double boiler when a distant wail drew her attention. "Jamie's awake," called Martha, as though any person in the house could have missed it. "Jamie," Olivia chimed in. Virginia did hope that the baby would not be as irritable this evening as he had been over the past several days. If only that next tooth would make an appearance, it would be a welcome relief to the entire family. There was no use trying to finish the pudding before getting the baby up. The girls were already climbing down from the table and heading for the stairs. Once Jamie was awake, it meant an instant change of activity for the entire household. Reluctantly, Virginia pushed the pudding to the back of the stove. She supposed it would be lumpy, but there was nothing she could do about it now. She was glad that neither her husband, Jonathan, nor their nephew, Slate, were very particular about food. There would be no complaints at the supper table over a few lumps in the evening dessert. "I think Toby Wallace likes me," 8-year-old Mindy announced to the family gathered around the large kitchen table for the evening meal, lumpy pudding and all. Virginia noted the twinkle in Jonathan's eyes as he lifted his head to study the freckled face across the table, framed in honey-colored braids over each shoulder. Baby James, who had been rescued from his high chair because of his fussiness to a place on his father's knee, took advantage of Jonathan's distraction to grab at his dinner plate and nearly dump it in their laps. Jonathan's hand flashed out to avert the disaster, and he moved his body to keep Jamie's hands away from the table. Jamie was offered a piece of bread crust to chew on. "How can you tell?" Jonathan queried Mindy when he had things under control once again. "'Cause," said Mindy, tipping her head to one side and giving her father an all-knowing look. "He looks at me in class, and he teases me, and he told Paul Conridge that he couldn't sit beside me, and he even chased me with a grasshopper." "Sounds about right to me," put in Slate with a chuckle. "A grasshopper!" hollered Martha, with no idea what the conversation was all about. "A grasshopper? Did it bite?" "It was dead, silly," responded Mindy. "Dead? Yuck! Yuck!" repeated Olivia, placing a hand over her mouth to keep her mouthful of mashed potatoes from spilling. Virginia let her gaze sweep around the table. The meal that she had struggled to prepare was being quickly consumed before her very eyes. A little sigh escaped her. If only she could get it to the table in as short a time as it took her family to dispose of it, her task would be much lighter. But then a smile lightened her face. She was blessed. Busy, but blessed. They all were. Together, sharing happenings and good-natured bantering and chuckles, all healthy, all loved. Her Jonathan, his hair still damp where he had washed the day's perspiration from his forehead. Slate, Jonathan's young nephew who had come to work with them. Virginia did not know how they would ever have managed without Slate. Their beloved Mindy, almost 9. Jenny's baby, who was one of this family as sure as if she had been born to them. It was easy to forget there ever was a time when Mindy had not been theirs. Martha, their mischievous, boisterous, funny family clown. Olivia, who spent her days watching and mimicking older sisters. Jamie, their usually good-natured little elf, whose incoming teeth had him momentarily cantankerous, to the point that he would not even sit in his own high chair. They were all there, her family who filled her days with busyness, her heart with love. She had been blessed. She wouldn't change her lot with anyone in the entire world. The next morning, when the yard still looked muddy, she bundled up her 3 after Mindy left for school and whisked them off for a visit to her mother in town. It was worth all the effort simply to avoid another argument with a pleading Martha. And Virginia needed to get out herself. Belinda's warm welcome confirmed to her that she had made the right decision. Mama had another fall. But Virginia's sense of reprieve for herself and her children was soon jolted back to reality by her mother's anxious words. Belinda's solemn tone brought Virginia's head up from unbundling the small Olivia. Belinda